Hello everyone, I'm Maxime and I'm a software engineer at Worteks. And in this talk I'm going to try to explain how I maintain free software, hopefully without selling out. So first of all, we've just talked about ethics, so let's continue on that subject, and I will share a bit of my personal ethics. I think free software is the better way to do software, just like Thierry earlier today. It's not the only way, and the other ways are not evil, but they are just not as good, in my opinion. And free software is the better way to do software, but in order to really reach that potential and to really be useful, to really be great, it needs to be, in my opinion, at least three things. So first, open source or free software needs to be useful. It needs to have the features that people actually need. So you need to be able, it needs to solve actual problems. You need to be able to do something with an open source product. Then a good open source software needs to be adaptable, because let's be realistic for 1 second, no on-the-shelf product will solve 100% of your needs. You always have some adjustments to do, some configuration. Maybe you have to install some plugins, and maybe you have to do some custom developments to really fit the product into your use case and to really solve your problems. So having a lot of features by default is good, but being adaptable enough to just get the last mile, if you will, is also something that really needs to be there. And finally, if you want you want the software to be easy to use, because if you have some product that has lots of features and that can be very adaptable, but you just can't figure out how to do it, it's useless to you because you don't have the skills or you don't have the time to really make it work for you. Right, so now my business model. I'm a LemonLDAP NG developer, and I work at a company called Worteks. If you don't know what LemonLDAP NG is, it's not really the subject of this code, so all you need to know, it's a bit like a highly configurable login form that's running on a dedicated server. Okay, it's a SSO system, so something like that, if you don't know what that is. LemonLDAP NG is, at least today, mostly funded by support contract. There's a little bit of SaaS, but mostly support contract. So that's how the money gets in and how we get money to work on LemonLDAP. So basically, we have customers. They give us money in order to do one of those three things, broadly. So some of them want to fix bugs, and that's pretty easy because it's easy for us, because a bug by definition is behavior that's obviously wrong. So you know what to do, you do it, and if it's a bug for one person, it's usually a bug for everybody. So you immediately upstream the bug fix. So a bug fix is money that's directly going towards making the software better. So that's the easy part of financing open source with support contracts. Then you have features. So that's where most of the money actually comes from for us. We have lots of users, lots of customers who are already using LemonLDAP, but they want some new features. And they pay us for it because we know the product very well. Those features, sometimes we upstream them, sometimes not, and that's what I'm going to talk later. So features are usually upstream. So the money that we get for new features ends up in the product as well. And then lastly, we have consulting, training, documentation, what we could broadly call support or services, that kind of stuff. And that's money that's not really going directly into the product. That's not money that's going upstream. Or maybe it could be going upstream. And I hope by the end of this presentation, I will convince you that some of that money could also go upstream as well. Okay, let's imagine what would happen if what we do on LemonLDAP completely matched the way the money gets in. If all we did was add new feature, because it's what most of our clients want, We would start with a code base here. That's LemonLDAP is a pretty old project, I think more than 20 years, something like that. So if we started maintaining LemonLDAP with that business model, we would add just one little feature for customer A, one more feature for customer B, with a little bit of overlap, as you can see, but I mean, it's all right, it's different customers, so there's probably no overlap for them, but there's a bit of overlap in the product. And if we keep doing that, a few years later, we will end up with what previous speaker, Toby, I think, called featureitis, which is what you see there. Too many features, too difficult to maintain because it's just features that were kind of glued together. And well, if there are developers among you, you know that that's difficult to handle. So if we really work like this, just adding features and nothing else, we would end up with a software that is too specialized because let's imagine a customer will want to pay for Oracle support, but no one will pay for SQLite support. So we have a software that's only compatible with Oracle. Adding features will become hard because of the maintenance burden of having just too many features that were not properly integrated together. So you all know what happens, spaghetti code, etc., and technical debt. The software would become harder to install because it would have too many external requirements because it has too many features and every feature brings in its own requirements. So maybe a piece of software that you need to install like a MySQL database and also Redis and also Elasticsearch. I've worked with software like that before and it's really a pain to install. And in the end, what happens is that only corporate users who have support contracts can use the software. So the software is not easy to use anymore. It has features that just a few users want, so it's not really useful to everyone. It's complicated to extend because the features are not properly integrated together, and it's hard to use. And personally, I think that's how we can sell out. So hopefully, LemonLDAP has not reached that point yet. And this is how we try to. I try to make sure that it stays that way. So in order to avoid this situation, what I try to do is something that I like to call grasping for opportunities. The idea is that every customer request that I get has to, I try to think of it as an opportunity to make the software better for everyone. More useful, more flexible, or easier to use. Those are my guiding principles. Basically, what I try to think is, okay, I have a customer, they want something, and I will try to make the software better for everyone, not just for that customer. And by making it better for everyone, I also make it better for that customer because the customer is part of the whole community of users. And also, a little reminder, customers change their mind eventually. So if one day they ask some feature, maybe they don't want it anymore the next day. So if you make it better for everyone, you also make it better for that customer for two different reasons. So how do I try to work when adding new features? Let's imagine that I have a new feature that a customer wants, very enterprise feature, sending suspicious events to an in-house notification server. So my customer has their own notification server, and they want suspicious events delivered to it for some reason. I always try to think of a new feature as on a scale from generic to specific. So in that situation, we have some parts of the new feature that are very generic, like the whole concept of reacting to events, gathering the event's context, maybe the IP address on the web browser. Is it Chrome or Firefox, or does the connection come from France or from somewhere else? So the whole reacting to events and gathering context, that's very generic. There is very specific part of this feature that's communicating with the in-house reporting or notification server. Maybe some business rules. Maybe we only want to send an alert like during the weekends or something. So business rules are very specific. And then there's a gray area in the middle, the classification event, deciding if an event is suspicious or not. Is that generic? Is that specific? That's not always clear. So, but it's okay if it's not completely decided, because then you can start to split the features into sub-features, into components. And I try to split components by how generic they are. And once I have done that, we can see that the different components have a different life cycle. The very generic component, which is the event generator, that's going to be upstream, because every software needs to have some sort of event generator. If you don't have that in your software, you really need to implement it. So the logic of generating event when something happens, I want that upstream. So this is going to get upstream, no doubt about it. The whole notification client that's going to connect to my customer's specific notification server, I don't want that in the software because that's too specific. We are not going to maintain it. They are going to maintain it because it's their server. Well, they can hire us for that, but I will not give that to the community because it's too specific. It's their own code. Of course, if it's Nagios, we will upstream it, but if it's completely custom, we won't. And then the gray area in the middle, a bit of a module that will listen to events from the generator and classify them as suspicious or not. Okay, it's easy to upstream because it's generic. Do we upstream it right away? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. If the community has already expressed interest in those features, we will upstream them. But if at the moment nobody really wants that, I will keep them separate and deliver them to my customer as plugins. And when there is another customers that want the same feature, I will integrate them into the main product. So we don't add a feature just for one user, basically. And separating components like that give us lots of opportunities for extension. The event generator, I said, it's something very useful. You want that in your software. So on this event generator, we can plug in lots of plugins for future needs, for future features, like dashboards and auditing facilities. On the security event listener, maybe for that particular customer, we will develop a default event classifier, but maybe another customer will want something more advanced, maybe something based on machine learning. And they can easily plug in their own. And maybe for sending the notification, we won't upstream the custom notification client, but maybe somebody will want an SMS instead, and all we need to do is to make a very small plugin to send an SMS. We don't have to redevelop the whole feature. Everything is almost already there, so we just need to add the tiny last bit. And that makes the software more adaptable, because all the key components are already there. You just need to develop the last tiny little thing that you're missing. So this is how I handle new features. And let's see how I try to handle, how I try to find more opportunities to improve the software when the customer does not want new feature, but something else. So, first of all, I always try to add unit tests to the software. It's never a good idea to add a unit test. When you are fixing a bug, adding a unit test to the software prevents the bug from reappearing. So you are saving time, saving for future time, and protecting against regressions. When you are writing unit tests, usually you discover other bugs. And so you solve bugs before they appear. And it also increases the coverage of unit tests inside the software, and it makes refactoring easier, and refactoring is the key element to make sure your code does not end up like a plate of spaghetti. So adding unit tests is always a good idea. I always try to do it. Also, I try to do it when adding new features to prevent issues from appearing in the first place. Another area where I try to improve the software any chance I get is dependencies. The less dependencies you have, the better. Managing dependencies is always inferior to removing them. If you can remove dependencies, I think I try to do it every chance I get, because less dependencies means the software is easier to install. It's more flexible because you can install it on operating systems where those dependencies are not available. It also improves security because there are less bugs in your dependencies and less security vulnerabilities in your dependencies. It improves OS compatibility. I already said it. So I always try to remove dependencies. Basically, the idea is to make a good use of your time. So when your customer pays, when my customer pays for something, I try to make sure I really use that money in the most efficient way. And I feel that writing documentation is not the best way to use the money that customers give me to write documentation. The best way to spend money that was given for writing documentation is to simplify how your application works. Simplify the install process, simplify the configuration, make better default values. And if you do that, your documentation will be smaller and it will take less time to write. So it's a good investment to spend some time on simplifying the software to write less documentation. When I have 4 days to write documentation, I always try to spend one trying to see if I can remove some steps from the documentation that I'm about to write. And docs are outdated the moment you finish writing them anyway, so you better try to write as little of it as you can. Using distribution packages is always a good idea as well, because it reduces a lot of the installation process to just one command. Instead of doing level 2 support, I try to improve the default behavior because instead of answering the same questions over and over and over, it's best to just fix the problem at the source. So if I have like 5 different customers who ask the same question about configuring some part of the software, it usually means that that part of the software is not very clear, it's confusing, maybe it's not in the right place, maybe it doesn't do the right thing. So it's best to try to fix that so you have less questions about the software. So it's a better use of everyone's time to make software that has better default behavior. It's not always obvious when you write a feature that it's not the right way, but you really have to listen to the feedback and fix it. And that can also be done on support contracts, on the budget that you have for just answering questions about the software. In conclusion, basically, I find that investing time wisely makes a big difference. It's a lot less frustrating because you don't solve the same problems over and over and over again. You really address them at the source. You spend more time now, maybe, developing 4 plugins like I've showed you earlier instead of 1. It takes a little more time, but it's going to save a lot of time later because next time, instead of writing 1 big plugin, you just write a tiny one, and it's much easier to maintain as well. Usually customers prefer when the prices go down. So if you tell them the first time you ask for a feature, it's going to cost a little more, but the future times it's going to cost a lot less. Usually they are pretty easy to convince. And also a good guiding principle I have is that today's freeloaders are tomorrow's sponsors. So the users that currently paid for the product's development all started as free users. You don't just start throwing money at an open source project. First, you use it for free, and then if you like it, you start paying for it. So if you only please, basically, if we only please our own customers, that's pretty much sowing our own branch. And well, that's all I had to say. Thank you for listening.